Hello and welcome to Zerocarbonista Series 6. This is the cow in the room. I'm Ian Collins, and this is your number one go-to environment-based podcast. If it's green, it's in. I tell you what else is in, Dale. Not so much in, but on, and that's you on the telly. You are never off it this week. As my old nan would say, what a tart.
Yeah, it was a busy week, and it kind of like, in a way, it's all about the spending review. It began on Tuesday with the big Sizewell story. Government saying they're going to, bung a stupid sum of money into this really rather stupid project, and that got me on the beep a couple of times. And then the actual spending review itself, of course, yesterday on Wednesday. And I was on College Green for that. Bumped into our old mate Richard Tice, actually.
You and Tice Green? What was it? Did you share a sparkling wine, or
Well, we almost shared a
maybe
mic.
Greg's?
He was on Times Radio after me. We almost shared a mic, but we said hello like we do. And I told him actually that I really liked them picking up the Swift brick policy, right? And he's like, "Oh, I bet that surprised you." And I'm like, "Well, actually, I think it's a smart move, and I don't understand why Labour have turned their backs on it. They support it in opposition. It's a simple thing. It's got widespread public support. It's good for nature. Why wouldn't they do it? I don't understand that." And I was telling John Pino on Times Radio, in that afternoon, same thing. He asked me about Labour, and I often get this question about, do you regret donating? Will you give more money? All that kind of stuff. And I just said, look, there are policies I disagree with, and that's fine. Sizewell, carbon capture. And then there are policies I just don't understand. Why would you not support the Swift brick? Just get it out of the way instead of, create this unpopularity, give this window to reform to say, well, we'll do the Swift brick. They're like, we'll lift the child cap. The things that Labour aren't doing, they're just gifting to Farage and Co.
It's probably worth, at this point, bearing in mind you've mentioned Swift brick maybe about 8 times, it might be worth for the uninitiated, Dale, explaining the Swift brick. Because this is a rather attractive proposition.
Yeah, it's basically a hollow brick with a little aperture, a little hole in it, and it creates homes for swifts, hence the name Swift brick, also for bats and a host of other kind of wildlife. Yeah. And the idea is in the planning bill that's going through Commons right now to have an obligation for house builders to put one Swift brick in every new house. Cost, I don't know, 40 quid, something like that. Yeah. House builders don't give a toss, right? They're not objecting to it. Nature groups are like, come on, this would be fantastic. The Tories are for it. I mean, everybody's for it. And Labour say, oh, it's not appropriate, actually, to put it in the planning bill. I don't understand that.
Vermin. What happens if you get a dirty old rat in your brick hole?
Do you think that's nobody's? I haven't seen that anywhere. I haven't seen anybody say, yeah, what about the mice, right?
Mice have rights too. You do know that.
Yeah, you can't go around calling them vermin.
No, that's like, very true. It's very sort of generalist.
You need to be more woke than that. Come on.
Pejorative term for these beasts. It's interesting. You and Ticey agreed on that. I'm always fascinated because obviously I interview people on College Green. And, we've spoken lots of times on the radio and TV when you've been on College Green, as well as, studio and other links like this. So when you're down there and you're the person being interviewed, this is the bit I don't see. So there's obviously a load of journalists and people, runners running around, go, oh, Mr. Vince this way and Mr. Tice this way. And, you're kind of like wacky racist style, all kind of almost in some sort of relay between media organizations. I mean, is it a bit weird down there when you're doing that? Do you just hang around afterwards and go, anybody else want to chat?
In a way, yes. So no to the first question, yes to the second question. Like, it's not weird. I guess I've got used to it. And we were hanging around after the Times interview, and then LBC came over and said, oh, Dale, can we have a quick chat? Do a news piece. And I had great fun, actually, just like let loose on the wealth tax, why we should have it, what it will do, and all that kind of stuff. And then eventually we looked around and there was nothing else happening, so we left.
Yeah, it's what so that's the way to do it, isn't it? Yeah, never overstay on College Green. It's a fool's errand. Well, let's have a look then at the kind of statement, because there's quite a lot in here. We might as well kind of start, I suppose, with Sizewell C.
Yeah, Sizewell C. I mean, I've made the case against Sizewell C so many times. I did get to make it this week in the media. It can't come onto the grid until 2040. The argument from the government is we need it for energy security. Um, we're going to be 100% green on the grid in 2030, and they
Sure.
say we need new nuclear to support the grid. I say, well, what are we going to do in the 10 years in between 100% green and Sizewell coming on the grid? If we need it, there's a credibility gap here
Yeah.
because Sizewell won't be there.
Well, that's why
Apart
God
from that,
invented Russia, isn't it? So just ask them for a bit of energy.
well, I don't know. But apart from that, it's going to be the most expensive electricity we've ever known. And it's going to put bills up on day one that they start building. So for 15 years, our bills will go up about £360 million a year just across households to pay for this thing that is going to come 10 years too late, the way I see it. And I made the point to a commentator this week that in regards to how we balance the grid and stuff like that, all we have to do is keep our gas-powered fire stations. No, I always get that wrong. Gas-fired power stations. All we have to do is keep them alive, and we'll use them less and less in this transition as we have more and more green energy.
Yeah.
When we need something, we just fire up the gas.
Uh,
No drama.
and that's a really good point to make, because I constantly have to tell people this. It's a transition, and those that advocate very passionately from an environmental perspective, like yourself and others, are not saying, right, tomorrow suddenly everything gets
Mm,
turned off and we start building more windmills.
mm,
Everyone's applying common sense here,
mm.
and that is that it is a transition, and that could have
Yes.
worked. And it seems extraordinary that the amount of money going into this nuclear project, and as you rightly say, the thing consumers are screaming for are lower bills.
Yeah.
It's going to do the very opposite, and I don't think
Yeah.
there's an economist in the land that doesn't acknowledge that.
You can't not acknowledge it as a simple fact. It's like one of the laws of physics. But I've had those same discussions. People have accused me of wanting to, just stop using oil. And I'm like, no, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a transition. The thing I suggest as an alternative this week might be interesting because I put together two different things: opposition to Sizewell on the one hand, and this thing called a Rooftop Revolution. We produced a report for it 6 months ago, probably. Put the two together because the sum of money, 40 billion to build Sizewell, is actually, funnily enough to fulfill the rooftop revolution, which is to put solar panels on 20 million homes in Britain. That will make 25% of all of the electricity we use as a country. Sizewell will make just 7% for the same sum of money. It'll be super fast because we haven't got to, build something rather
Yeah.
crazy. And there won't be grid delays that you get with big renewable energy projects. You can just bang it on people's rooftops and away you go. And it'll knock about 500 quid off the annual energy bills of 20 million households, so giving them immediately the benefit of the green economy. Same sum of money,
Yeah.
entirely different outcome.
And when, I've heard people go, well, logistically, that's quite a lot involved. Do you remember? And I'm not making a smart point here, but genuine, there is a connection here. Do you remember when Sky first came on board and they were putting dishes on people's
Mm,
roofs?
yeah,
Now, those fellas would turn up, they'd have a dish on your roof in about 7 minutes and then be
yeah,
off down the road again.
yeah.
And
Doing your neighbour.
they found, because when I booked these people, I thought like scientists were going to show up to my house. This is years ago, and we're going to be sort of almost trying to communicate with the moon or something to get my dish working, so I could get all
Yeah,
the great programs. And it was just this, character in a sort of
yeah.
overalls who went, "Hello, mate. I kind of put your dish up," and his mate came out with a big old ladder. Up he went, stuck it up there, pulled the cable down, lobbed it through my letterbox, and suddenly I had 48 channels on my TV. So the
Perfect.
point is, ladder technology and roof technology there is precedent for people working fast and swift on a roof.
Yeah, it won't take that long. And it's an interesting thought as well, because in the rollout of things like fiber, it's done street by street. We could roll out solar street by street. It's a very efficient way to
Yeah,
do
I
it.
mean, look at how when they're putting super fast broadband in, every single house has a little hole dug in front of it in order to
Hmm.
kind of accommodate it. But it's
Yep.
street by street. They do it, then they go to the next street, and then
Yes.
6 months later, everyone's forgotten they've done it, and it was very simple.
Yeah, yeah, just like that. And we're advocating starting with public sector housing first. The poorest people, arguably, among us live in council and affordable homes and that kind of stuff. Just
Yeah.
start there, which will mean that the money we spend is targeted, reducing energy poverty from the get go.
Well, you've brilliantly led into two other aspects that are worth the word from you, Dale. Rachel Reeves unveiling £39 billion housing boost. This involves affordable homes. Has this gone far enough? Will it do what it says on the tin?
I really like this announcement. I mean, it's a big sum of money, and it's all targeted at affordable homes. And what I read in the newspaper just kind of tickled me a little bit because it said that most of the money would be spent on existing houses that are empty, that are built as affordable homes, but the housing associations can't afford to buy them.
Yeah.
So it's still a good outcome because they get put into circulation for people to live in. But I think we need from that a different definition of an affordable home. It has to be one that can be afforded by a housing association.
Well, I did make this point today on the radio that this word affordable is a little bit iffy. And I said to a guy, it's a bit like when you go past a sort of set of new apartments are being built, and there's a big sign outside that says "Move in tomorrow for just," and they put the word "just" followed by the figure £495,000. You think never ever put the word "just" in front of that figure. And similarly, because it's doing a lot of heavy lifting. Similarly, the
Yeah.
word affordable, I mean, what do they mean by that? It's got to be affordable. And that's, I would say, a seismic shift in house pricing.
Yeah, no, I think there's a definition around it as a certain percentage below a market average or something like that. But
Yep.
clearly, they're not affordable because there are a whole bunch of them sat empty because housing associations can't afford them. So it made me laugh, but it's still great news. 39 billion is a shed load of money, and it's
Yep.
going to get a lot of people off the streets, hopefully. Oh, I'm not
Absolutely.
saying they're on the streets now, but it's going to solve part of our housing crisis. The
You
other
mentioned, go on, Dale.
well, the other thing that came up this week was looking at the housing crisis. Labour's target for 1.5 million homes by the end of this parliament, and the planning bill, which a lot of people are saying will tear up environment protections in order to
Yeah.
give consent more easily to developers. What I learned was that there are 1.4 million homes in Britain consented and land banked. They aren't being built by the industry because they like to keep prices high. So
Ah,
I've suggested instead of changing planning law, let's change rate law. At the moment, rates on empty land are very low. And if you build houses on it, then of course you pay rates per house, and it's considerably higher. So I've suggested that we put rates on land with planning permission that's been unused. We put
yeah.
them up to assume the house has been built already, so that the developers don't get a free land banking option.
Do you know
There's
what?
1.4 million just
Yeah,
waiting
and
to
these
go.
these people buy land in the same way as people put money in the bank for interest. It's literally that, and just
Mm,
leaving a field there
mm,
unused is
yeah,
worth millions across the
mm,
board.
yeah.
And as you rightly say, there's not a lot kind of really done to address that.
And the point is, we don't need to get more houses consented. We need to get more built because we've consented enough. We don't need to
Yeah.
change the regulations. We need to force them, developer people, to build what they've got.
Let's move to a completely different story, Dale. Government plans to ban bottom trawling. What's the latest on this?
Yeah, there's an announcement this week by Steve Reed, and bottom trawling is the most hideously destructive thing that you can imagine. Heavy steel nets are dragged across a sea floor, driving all of the creatures there into it. Most of it is bycatch, it's not wanted, um, and it leaves behind just devastation. And we've got these marine conservation zones around our country, quite a few of them, but we allow trawling in them. I mean, for sake, how does that make any sense? So what he announced this week, he's going to ban trawling in half of them. So I'm like, that's great. But what about the other half?
Yeah. Why would you ban it only in half of them?
I don't know. I mean, it's something, right?
I
Because it's
mean,
been allowed for too
yeah.
long.
And that trawling, you pick up any old guff and nonsense and stuff that is, might not look much to you and I, but to the
Mm,
sea and the whole environment of the
yeah.
sea is absolutely crucial.
The whole ecosystem is trashed to catch a few fish.
Yeah. Let's move to this story because this is rather interesting. The cost of reforms anti-environmental policies. What are you making here?
Well, let me have a quick look because this one came in late and I hadn't seen it, but I'm quite tickled by it. The New Economics Foundation have estimated here that the anti-net zero plans of reform will knock nearly 100 billion pounds off of our economy.
Hmm.
Wow, that's Brexit on steroids. That is.
Wow. Wow. So this is in terms of what jobs or what? What's the deal here?
Yeah, I think it must be. There's no detail here, but it's a proper, economic study because
Yeah,
net zero brings jobs, it brings economic growth and all that kind of stuff.
of
I
course.
don't know what they've modelled it on, but Brexit cost us what 4% off of our GDP. This is much bigger, and
Yeah, but we
we've
don't
been
have to
making
listen
this
to the
argument.
don't have to listen to the French anymore, Dale. I mean, imagine waking up every morning with that in mind. Keep it in your mind that the Mr. Macron has nothing to do with the UK anymore, because France were secretly running this place, according to Nigel Farage.
And from my perspective, this is like Farage's encore or his sequel. You know, he brought us Brexit, sold to us on a pack of lies in terms of the benefits and the disbenefits of being in the EU, and now he's bringing us Nexit, his plan to exit the whole net zero debate and economy. And here these guys, these serious economists, are saying, "Blimey, that's going to cost an awful lot of money, Mr. Farage." And we need to expose the mirage of Farage when he makes these statements about green jobs and green bills and all this kind of shit, and that's the new job.
Here's here's
He wants
some
to send
great
people back down coal mines. You know that, right?
back down the mines. Even Thatcher stopped that.
Yeah, for a different reason,
I
but
mean, great. Here's a question from Ruth Jennison on Facebook. I'd love to have solar panels on my house, but it's a grade 2 listed building. Do you have any advice? I presume planning won't let me. But obviously, if I can choose one, I'd pick protecting the future over protecting the past. That's a good way to look at it.
yeah, it's interesting because I've lived in protected housing like that, with grade listing and that kind of stuff, and it's really tricky. I think planning law needs to change. I don't think it should matter what you
Yeah.
live in. Solar panels on a roof are temporary; they're not a permanent change to the fabric of a building, and it can help people afford to live in them, which helps to preserve them. So there's a good argument for that. But in terms of practical advice, other than ask the council because they might be okay with it, is put it on the ground. I've done this, and it's very much easier to get permission for solar panel in your garden. If you've got a garden, you build some kind of frame,
Yeah,
put the panels
doesn't
on
have
the
to be on
ground.
a roof.
Perfect. Yeah.
One from Diana Gardner on email. Dale, can you talk to Ed Miliband? What the WTF? Nuclear power? What's going on? I mean, it's a good point. You've just made your, in fact, for years, you've made your opinions known on it. Ed Miliband really believe in this himself?
Yeah, I heard him in the news this week saying that he'd begun the whole Sizewell thing like, decades ago or something, because that's how long these things take. He must believe in it. The government were boasting about 10,000 jobs this week. They
Yeah.
said this £14 billion will help create 10,000 jobs. I did ever such quick mathematics. That's £1.4 million per job. I mean,
Wow.
anybody can create a job if you slap 50 years of annual average pay on the table.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's easy in the short term.
Any
But
fool
then,
can do that.
but also, they're not new jobs, are they? Because it's not like you suddenly invent, a load of builders. I mean,
Mm.
these people are currently doing a job somewhere else, and then they'll move on to that job, and then they'll move on. They're not necessarily new jobs. No more than if you suddenly build a house around the corner, you don't say, "Oh, we've created 20 jobs." It's like, no, these are just the 20 builders working on that project.
It creates demand for 20 more builders, but you've made me chuckle because I imagined this classic thing that builders do. They're working on your house, right? In this case, your house is Sizewell, and then they just disappear, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we just got another job that
Yeah,
we're dabbling with," and then they pop back and do a little bit more.
yeah.
That'd
You
be
didn't
funny.
tell me you wanted it to glow. I can't wait for
Oh,
those moments.
and here's the thing: on one of these radio shows I did this week, the chief exec of Sizewell was on the radio, and she made the most bizarre argument for why Sizewell will be cheaper than Hinkley. She said, when we went to build Hinkley, it wasn't fit for UK standards or something, and we had to make 7,000 design changes. She said, when we come to build Sizewell, we'll know what we're building. And I'm like, are you serious? You're saying you started building Hinkley without knowing what you were building? Is it?
That is
I mean,
literally an admission. Yeah,
I don't
we
think she
built.
thought it through.
Yeah, not like he's not building a rabbit hutch, mate. It's like a nuclear plant. I mean, you've got to
And,
kind of know your turf. You might think.
yeah, and the cost of that one trebled
Yeah,
to over 40 billion. Maybe that's why, but I think actually it was bullshit, PR bullshit that she was spouting, and nobody had thought it through.
yeah,
I mean, I'd be like, don't go on the radio and say you didn't know what you were building until you'd finished it.
yeah. Because it
Don't
doesn't.
say
It
that.
also doesn't give us much faith in the new one. Because what you're saying is, at best, you're a new adapter to this technology. And you're building an absolute enormous nuclear power plant.
Yeah.
And Peter Barden echoing this reference Sizewell, the bulk of the audience agree, including myself. That said, is there a realistic chance of undoing Sizewell now? I mean, there's always
Well, I
those
think,
possibilities.
tell you what I think. I think there's a realistic chance it doesn't go ahead because
Yeah,
the government have basically committed about half the capital cost of Sizewell. Now they're looking for somebody else to stump up the other 20 billion.
yeah.
Who's going to do that? I think that might be That might be a fault line in the plan. It might
Well, and
be.
also it could go a bit HS2 on us, couldn't it? In the sense that
Exactly.
what starts out as one budget becomes like you can almost see this being double the initial estimates.
Mm. Oh, it already is. It already is that. But maybe double the 40. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, God, Jesus.
who knows?
Yeah.
Shall we do some X-rated corner, Dale?
Yeah, I think I need some light relief.
We love this. This is the part where we read out some of the messages from people who aren't, shall we say, necessarily natural fans of Dale Vince. Peter says Greta Thunberg's big sister spouting absolute shite once more. This is aimed at
Didn't
you.
know. I think he means me. Yeah, and I think you're right. Well, yeah, what can I say? Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you,
there you
Peter.
go.
Yeah, no, fuck off.
One here. This is reference the Gaza flotilla. Again, it's a Greta point. Don't see you heading out to Gaza to help. What's wrong? Can't afford the airfare.
That's he's a bit confused there, isn't he? I
Yeah.
don't like to fly. I've just been around Europe on a train.
And I don't think you'd get to. I think there's many runways available in Gaza. Sadly,
No, and it's the most bizarre thing this week, the language used by our newspapers around what the Israeli army did. In international waters, they hijacked a boat flying the British flag. Now, anybody else does that, we call it what it is, piracy, hijacking.
yeah.
The media here called it taking control of the ship. And when they let Greta go, they kidnapped her, they took her to Israel against her will. And when they let her go, the headlines were like, Israel deports Greta. I'm like, no, they didn't. They kidnapped her and then they let her go. That's not deporting somebody.
That's a great. I love the kind of elastic use of language.
Yeah, it's crazy. But our media and our politicians do this for Israel. The war crimes, the genocide, the murders, the piracy. We change the language of all of that, like like estate agents might. It's like, oh, we took control of that boat in foreign waters, and I don't know.
Here's one
Run
from
out.
Munchin Words who says, you want everyone to pay tax and bills for everything, including the grass you want to shove down their throats. Your rants here show you have the best supply of weed in the Stroud area. Get that from?
That's
Is that
mildly
along with you owning
funny.
a helicopter?
Oh yeah, yeah, and a coal-fired helicopter, if I remember right.
With a nuclear top.
Top, nuclear top. Yeah, but it's not
Blades,
there
whatever
yet.
they're called.
It's
Yeah,
coming in 15 years. But I've left space for it, right?
indeed.
I mean, the funny thing is, our food to grass thingy. I was going to update you. We're making great progress. Within a couple of weeks, we'll have permission from the food standards people, FSA, I think it is, to actually eat it ourselves, which should be fun. That means we
Well, there
can
you
make
go.
products, testing the texture and the taste, and then we can taste test it.
Stunning. Yitzhar, this is a post on Farage copying Trump. Clown boy, you are aware reform aren't yet the government with only 5 MPs. What you scared of? And why not attack the worst government in British history, Labour, or even the Conservatives, who also fucked up big times?
Oh, didn't they? Didn't they ever? Let's not forget 15 years of that shit show. Labour haven't been in power for a year yet. And yeah, of course, I know Farage is not the government, and I know, but he says bonkers things. He says dangerous things, and if we let him get traction, look what'll happen. Next thing you know, we'll be leaving Europe again or something. I don't know. But I met a much more sensible man today. I
Who
met
was
with
that?
Gordon Brown, and we had a really interesting
Did you?
chat.
That's
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
What'd you
We
talk
took,
about? Or are you not allowed to
yeah,
say?
briefly about the financial crash in 2008.
Yeah.
And the 12 Mercedes that the boss of RBS had to drive himself around with, and some other bizarre things that no doubt led to the downfall of RBS. I don't
I'm
know.
sure.
But we were talking about his charity. He's got a charity. It sounds amazing. It's called Multi-Bank, and it's basically based on the idea of a food bank or an energy
Yeah.
bank or whatever. And they take stuff from like Amazon and other suppliers that will go to incineration or landfill. It's all brand new, but gets returned, and they give it to families in need, families in poverty.
Yeah.
And I think he said they gave away 8 million items last year, and they're aiming for 10 million this
Yeah,
year.
he's big on this. It's a big area. He's kind of like dedicated his post-political life to that sort of area of charity and benevolence.
Yeah.
And good
Child
for him.
poverty is a big thing to him. And I
Yeah.
talked to him about breaking the link because I realized that, we talked about people in poverty. Often it's people with jobs, like, 70% of 5 million kids in our country are in child poverty. 70% of them are in families that work,
Yeah.
but they need benefits and still are in poverty. We talked about that. And I made the point to him that actually, if we could bring the cost of living down by bringing energy bills down, it can make a big difference. We're about to make a calculation now because we've got the numbers from 2023. Breaking the link would have saved £43 billion off our energy bills. That's £400 per household. So we're
Got it.
going to make the link and just express that in terms of children lifted out of poverty if we broke the link in 2023.
So tell us about Drax. Who have you written a letter to and why?
Well, there's this outfit called the Subsidy Advice Unit, apparently,
Yeah.
and we've just written them a letter. Deadline is tomorrow. It's gone in today. They're looking at the subsidies. The next round of subsidies for Drax will begin at the end of next year, and they're slated at the moment to be £1.8 billion. And there's all kinds of things wrong with this. They've been exposed by a whistleblower for burning ancient forests from Canada. And while denying it completely, there's a whole bunch of, I'm going to say lies, inverted commas at least, but let them come. In this whistleblower letter, it points to the lies that have been told to Parliament, and that we've been giving them billions of public money. They made £1 billion last year, and their accounts say that when their subsidies end in 2026, they're ready to run without subsidies. But here they are saying, hey, we need £1.8 billion of subsidies, Gov. We've basically written to this team anyway, this outfit, and said, look, this is your rule book. This is the things that you judge subsidies on. And this thing's in breach of all of them. So how can you possibly not recommend the end of subsidies for Drax? That's the point. If we were successful in doing that, it'd save us a shed load of money. It wouldn't shut Drax down. And that's not necessarily the point, but it would save us a shed load of money.
They just want to help people, Dale.
I'm not sure who they're helping.
It's just a bit of
Foreign
wood,
shareholders.
They're
Foreign
like
shareholders, isn't it?
yeah, you think. Listen, we've hit the clock, Dale Vince, but we are back in 7 days. And of course, the good news is you can follow Dale on social media, which is twitter.com/Dale Vince or x.com, facebook.com/Dale Vince, and on TikTok too. And of course, this podcast lands every Friday morning, bang on the dot, 8 o'clock. You can actually set your alarm by it. We always giggle when we say this. Well, I think it does, but maybe not always.
Terms and conditions apply.
Terms and conditions apply. Exactly. Yeah. Contact a lawyer for details and all that business. And of course, make sure you tell everybody you know about this podcast. And we'll be back in a week. Have a good one, Dale.
Yeah, I will do. Thank you. See you then.